Hey there, and welcome to the first video in the revamped Space Shooter tutorial playlist. So this is just going to be a remake of something I've done previously with a lot more focus on quality in this one. So if you're not familiar with my channel, this is what we'll be making by the end of this playlist. So we have a simple space shooter using some content that I'll go through in just a moment, which is readily available to everyone. And we're just going to be spawning in waves of enemies. We have a few different types of enemies, a few different types of projectiles, and it's just a nice simple project to get things started. So this is a project template I made for myself just to make sure that everything works, but we'll be going from a completely empty project so that we can see every step of how we'd get from an empty project to a complete game, albeit a very simple game. So if you're making a brand new project for this, then go for the blueprint version. No content needed. We're not going to use any of the other example projects, and I've chosen not to have any starter content. The next thing we're going to do is look at adding in the models and the assets that we'll be using. So like last time when I created the similar playlist, we're going to use the assets from the content examples. Just in case you're not familiar with that, we can get that from the Epic Launcher. You go to the learning content and we can just type in content. Alternatively, you can just scroll down and you can find content examples down here. Click on this, and if you've not already downloaded it, you'll get the option to download it here. Otherwise, you can create a new project with the example content in it. If you do already have this, then just open that up. And inside of the content examples project, what we're going to do is in the main search bar here, just type the word pixel. And we want a few of the assets here. So we want the turquoise colored bars, which will be the static meshes. We want the player ship, the enemy ship, the pixel cube, and we also want the pixel engine, the pixel explosion, and we'll go for the pixel explosion player. And we'll create a custom version of this in our project, so we don't actually need the enemy explosion as well. With all of those selected, and I was just control selecting that just in case anyone's not familiar with the interface, we're going to right click on any of the selected assets, and we're going to go to Asset Actions, and we will migrate these. So this is just pulling it from this project into ours. So say OK to that. That's just telling us everything that's going to be pulled over. So it's also, the reason we're doing it this way is it's also taking any dependencies that we have. So things like we haven't selected the flare material or the flare texture, but because the engine knows that it's using that in one of the other objects that we're taking, it's going to take that with it as well. So it's really useful. So if we OK that, we will scroll down here, and we will find the project that you've just created. And as I said, mine was the YouTube shoot 'em up. I'm going to go to the content folder, and this is important. We need to make sure that we put it directly in the content folder. If you try to put it anywhere else, you'll get a warning saying that it may corrupt some of the files, or they won't be usable. So just to avoid that, just stick it straight in the content folder, and we can move it around in the project when we go back. So with that done, we'll just close the content examples and go back to our project. Okay, so back in the project, we have our content examples folder. We're going to tidy this up now just to make it a little bit easier to maintain the project as we go through. So I'm going to right click on the content folder, create a new folder. I'm going to call this one assets. Inside of the assets folder, I right click again, and I'll create a new folder called textures. Another folder called materials, and a final folder called meshes. Outside of this, we'll also create, again in the content folder now, not in the assets folder, a new folder called blueprints. And we'll create a final folder for now called maps. And in fact, just going back to the assets folder, right click in the assets folder, and I'll create one called particles as well, because we already have some of the particles to take care of. So from the example content now, what we can do is if we go to the effects, we can just drag the material effect into our materials folder. We can drag the texture into our textures folder. And if we just drop down the input examples, which is where the example content came from, we can drag the effects into particles. And we can drag all of the materials as well into our single materials folder. And I'm just clicking move here rather than copy. We only need one version of them. And finally, we'll take the meshes and put that into our meshes folder. So we should now be able to delete the examples folder, so that's tidied that straight up for us. And the next thing we'll do is we'll just create a new map. So if we go to, if we just press Control and N, we'll get the new map window. I'm going to go to an empty level because we don't need any of the skybox or anything like that for this, the game that we'll be making. And if we press Control S, this will give us the option to save the game or save the map. And we're going to put that into the maps folder, and we'll just call this main. And finally, just to make sure that we don't need to redo this every time we open the editor, we'll go to the project settings. And if for some reason you don't already have that open, you can find that by going to Edit and then go down to Project Settings. That will just bring you here. We want to go to the Maps and Modes, and we're just going to set the Editor Startup Map to be our main level. And this is simply whenever you open the engine or the editor, this is the map that it will load for us now. And we can set the game default map as well. And this is the default map that will be loaded if you compile and build the game into a deployable project, such as a .exe or something. So that just saves us time in the future. And one final thing that I want to do, we're not going to actually do any blueprinting in this video, but we're just going to right click in the blueprints folder. And quite an interesting little thing that I've noticed here is that if you haven't created something in a folder and you close the project and you open the project back up, that folder tends to disappear. So just to stop that happening, we're going to create a new blueprint class inside of the blueprints folder. We're going to create the game mode base, and we'll just call this the BP underscore game mode. So specifically using uppercase BP underscore game mode in camel casing, which is the uppercase G and uppercase M, just because that's a standard Unreal naming convention. So that's going to be the game mode that we use as we go through the project anyway. And as I said, it just stops that folder from disappearing. And the other thing that we can do is, whilst we've got the project settings open and we're in our maps and modes, if we drop down the selected game mode option, we can check a few things here. So we can see that at the moment with this drop down, everything's grayed out. We don't have any control over this, so all of this is going to be spawned in. When we press play, we're going to get a default pawn, default player state and things, and some of these we don't want. So we're going to be controlling that in later videos through our game mode. So if we select this drop down option and select the BP underscore game mode we just created, we can see that when we need them, we now have full access opened up for the components of our project. Okay, so just Control Shift S and that will save all. We're going to leave that here for now. I just wanted to spend the first video to get everyone to the same point. And I'm going to go straight on to creating the second video so that we actually have something straight away to move on to, which will be a little bit more interesting. As always though, if you've enjoyed the content or find it useful, then please do leave a like and give the video a share. That always helps. If you'd like to be kept up to date with the latest content, then do feel free to subscribe to the channel. Alternatively, you can follow me on Twitter. Links for that will be in the description below. And now, if you'd like to show your support for the channel, you can check out the Patreon page. As ever though, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.